Well, greetings, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Begin by Praying. Now, last week we took a look at Romans 8:28, a verse that assures us that God will take our circumstances and turn them around for good if we trust Him to do that. Today we're going to see the power of that verse come to life in the story of a man named Joseph, whose life seemed to be nothing more than unjust circumstances and suffering. Now, Joseph was the favorite son of 12 sons born to Jacob. The Bible tells us that when Jacob was a teenager, he had a dream that his brothers would all bow down to him and worship him. And he shared this dream with his brothers, and as you can imagine, they weren't too happy about it. His brothers, they all despised him for his arrogance, and they plotted against him. And one day when they were out in the field, they took their brother and sold him to a group of foreigners who were passing by. Now, the Bible tells us that even as a slave, Joseph never lost his faith in God to deliver him, and that God had his hand upon him the whole time. Let's take a look at what Genesis chapter 39 says. This is verse 3. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. You see, even the Egyptian leaders could see the favor of God on Joseph. As if being a slave wasn't bad enough, at one point he was even thrown into prison, being falsely accused of sexually assaulting the wife of an Egyptian leader. But even while he was in prison, God's hand was upon him, and he showed him favor in the eyes of the jailers. Did he have times of discouragement? I'm sure he did. He's only human. After all that he endured, all these years of imprisonment, he never lost his faith in God. Joseph ended up being promoted to the administrator or governor over all of Egypt. And it was he who was responsible for bringing Egypt through a 7-year famine. And during this time, his brothers lived in a neighboring land, and they too suffered from the famine. And they went to Egypt to get some food. And it was here that Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. And you know what? When his brothers found out who he was, they did indeed bow down to him. But that's far from the point. Listen to what Joseph told his brothers here in Genesis chapter 50. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Joseph understood the meaning of Romans 8:28 thousands of years before it was written. And what God did in his life, He'll do in our lives too if we trust Him to bring about a good result. I hear many people over the years wondering, how can a God who claims to love us allow such suffering and tragedies to happen in this world? Well, here's how. Because He promises to turn those circumstances around and use them for good and for His glory if we trust Him to do it. So I want to encourage you here today. Whatever you're going through, whatever your circumstances are, your story isn't over yet. God has a wonderful plan for your lives, and He promises to bring about a good result, just like He did in the life of Joseph for those who love Him. Thank you for joining me here today. I hope to see you right back here next week. And until then, keep your eyes on Jesus and not on your troubles. Thank you.